So this is the brand new Pixel 7a, and the weird thing is it's retailing at $499. This is $50 more expensive than the Pixel 7a when it was on sale a few weeks ago. Like, this phone has been out since last year, but it's been on sale so many times for a price point that's lower than the new 7a. And I find that interesting because I don't think we're gonna see the same price point of the Pixel 7 at $449 anymore. I think those days are done. But it also makes me feel like this new 7a is a bit overpriced. Like, I kind of wish they priced it at $449 instead, even maybe $400. But the reality of it all is that this phone, even though this is a mid-range phone, literally feels like a flagship device. And I think the best way to talk about it is to compare it to last year's Pixel 6a to see where they kind of improved and places where they didn't. For one, cosmetically, they kind of look very similar. On the previous version, you had this black visor. It was thinner and closer to the body. On the new version, you have more of a metal piece, very similar to the Pixel 7. The thing you should know though is that the Pixel 6a is easier to hold. If I have all three phones beside each other, you can see that there's a difference. The Pixel 7a is taller, it's obviously thicker, it's a bit heavier. In fact, there'd be times I'd pick up the 7a thinking I picked up the regular Pixel 7. And that's kind of weird because the 7a has a 6.1 inch display, whereas the 7 model has a 6.4. Now the back of it is still plastic like the previous version. The regular 7 is obviously glass, and then the front is using Gorilla Glass 3. So very similar to the previous model, but the edges or around here are all metal. I kind of wish they kept the black color. I think that's very unique because most smartphones are using a silver or dark gray aluminum chassis. But the button placements are the same. The power button and the volume rockers are still on the right-hand side. They're just as clicky as last year. The display sizes are identical. In fact, the only difference is that you now have 90 Hertz on the Pixel 7a. That's amazing. That was one of the biggest complaints about last year's phone. And I'll talk about battery now because even though they reduced the battery size, I think it's 4385 milliamp hours compared to 4410 on the Pixel 6a, I'm still getting very similar battery life. So I'm going to chalk this off to the Tensor chip, the newer version of it, being a little bit more efficient. In terms of actual color accuracy and screen brightness, I'm not seeing that big of a difference between both devices. They look just as good no matter which mode you have it on, but they did change the front-facing camera. On the previous version, it was 8 megapixels and it could only top out at 1080p. The new Pixel 7a has a 13 megapixel camera and can shoot up to 4K 30. All right, so now you're looking at the front-facing cameras of the Pixel 6a and the Pixel 7a. You guys let me know, obviously, which microphone sounds better, and more importantly, which camera actually looks better. Now, if you want your phone to be one-handable as possible, definitely stick with the regular 6a. It just feels like a proper one-handable phone. In fact, if you look at both displays, the bezels are actually thicker on the newer 7a. The 7a still has dual speakers. In fact, they sound very similar to last year's model. I did measure the loudness on both of these devices, and if anything, because of the bigger chassis, it gets about 1 decibel louder, but it's really hard to tell the difference. Now, even though the 6a and 7a share the exact same version of Android, they look identical in every single way, I did find the 7a to feel a bit more fluid. Obviously, the 90 Hertz refresh rate does play a role. It just makes scrolling and everything like that feel super smooth, but this is using the Tensor G2, whereas the 6a is using the original Tensor chip. And 6 gigabytes of RAM versus 8, those 2 extra gigabytes do make a difference in terms of day-to-day activities. I find that more stuff can be left in the background and launching apps were a tiny bit quicker. But look, it's not that much of a difference. I'm really splitting hairs here. If you have a 6a right now, upgrading to the 7a probably just doesn't make a lot of sense. But I will say that the cameras on the rear are different now. I thought they would be the same because this is obviously a lower priced phone, but we actually have different sensors overall, like 64 megapixel wide lens and a 13 megapixel ultra wide lens. That's different compared to the 6a, which uses two 12 megapixel cameras. And the crazy thing is, Google was able to make the photos look very close. The only differences I could really see was during the day where the Pixel 7a tended to make some of the shots look a tiny bit more bright, a little bit more vibrant, whereas the 6A tends to have that typical Google Pixel contrast look. I also noticed that the 7A did a slightly better job of lifting the shadows so that you could see more detail, whereas the 6A tended to crush the blacks a bit more. But again, the difference is so minor. Even at nighttime, it really comes down to personal preference because both phones did a fantastic job. The 6A tended to make things look a bit more blue, whereas the 7A, things looked a lot more realistic. No matter which shot I took, both phones did an incredible job. In fact, they're so close that it's really hard to say if one phone is truly better than the other. But you do get a new feature with the 7A. You get long exposure now. This is a mode that's not on the 6A. I don't know if they're gonna bring a software update for the 6A users, but you can now select long exposure mode and get those crazy trail lights when cars or lights pass by. Now, both phones can shoot 4K 30. I think they did a great job, but I obviously feel like the footage on the Pixel 7A looks better overall. This is definitely an improvement from the previous Pixel 6A, but again, it's not like it's a massive jump forward. It's just more of these tiny little iterative updates that improve the overall camera experience. So here's the thing. The price of the Pixel 7A being at $499 may not sit well with a lot of people when they saw the Pixel 7 drop down to $449. But even for $499, this is still such a fantastic phone for the money. You're probably not going to see the Pixel 7 drop that low again, and this is probably the lowest you're going to see a Pixel going for the next little while. And for $499, you're getting a smartphone that feels like a true flagship. Yes, you're getting a little bit of plastic on the back, but everything inside of here is a true Pixel 7, as long as you don't mind having a slightly smaller display. Now, if you have the older Pixel 6A, there's nothing really to get jealous about. Maybe the higher refresh rate, like that was probably the most appealing thing to me. But everything else in terms of speed and camera is a tiny bump up. It's not a massive leap forward. So just chill with your phone till the next iteration. If you have any more questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.